Well, welcome to the Performance Zone. This is a special edition of the Performance Zone. I've got a special guest with me here today, and we are going to be covering some great information. And by the way, this is not just a one-off. I mean, it is kind of a one-off, but it's going to be a one-off series for the next 6 weeks. I believe we're at 6 weeks. It might be 7, it might be 5. We don't know. We'll let you know when we get there, but there's some great information we're going to be sharing with you. With me on the line is my good friend, Pat Grosse from, I guess you're from the UK, but you're living down in Australia, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And what we're going to talk about over the next several weeks is something that we kind of came up with called the concept of the 5D thinking, right? It's kind of going above and beyond, forget out of the box thinking, because we're kind of at this point of the game, you should be the box isn't even an issue anymore, really. We're talking even interdimensional thinking. Actually, we're just talking about the multitudes of ways and different ideas and things and concepts that we can bring to the table that can help you produce more, be more effective, and stay on pace in this ever-changing world, to keep pace with the changes that are going on in this world. So today we're going to talk about why you can't start building on the 10th floor. And I got some feedback from some people on that. That was, I'm sure, Pat, you probably got some of that too. And people say, what are you talking about? Why you can't build on the 10th floor? It's something that came up to me, especially this time of year. It's prevalent because people make these things called resolutions, and then they're not resolute in their resolutions. And, I started thinking about why is that? And we always talk about foundations and getting the beginning and getting started. And what hit me one day was that it's kind of like the whole concept of people saying, I want to build a building, but I want to start on the 10th floor. It could be 7th floor, 8th floor, whatever. But in other words, they're not interested in putting down a foundation. And you and I have had this conversation, or these types of conversations on a number of occasions over the past little while. But that foundational, they're always, I mean, do you find the same thing, that people always want to start where it's easy? I guess it's like once all the hard work's done.
Yeah, I think also it's a bit of a default starting point as well for many, including myself, because many of us are technicians in terms of we've got expertise in a certain area, and we're introduced to the world of business. And we bring along, and then certainly in my case, when I started my business, I brought along my clients. I had a pool of clients already that I could draw from, a marketplace. And like most businesses, it's great in the first couple of years. And then usually when they say the businesses start to struggle after about 3 years, and that's certainly what happened with mine. And in hindsight, I can tell you the story of going, this is something that many businesses will sort of understand and identify with. And it's not just businesses. I work with programs and projects as well. Is that you sort of don't, if you don't have a foundation in place, and we talk about what that is from my experience as well, after that 3-year mark, if you haven't done your homework, then you start and you haven't got the foundation, then the building starts to crumble. And that's where you see this high proportion of businesses that go out of business within 3 years. It's usually a high percentage. And a lot of it is because they don't have the foundations. And we fell into that trap. Now, I'm made of sterner stuff. So I went through the whole process of hitting rock bottom. And you hear a lot of presenters talk about, how they hit rock bottom. And I'm not saying it's like something you have to do in life. God forbid, just avoid it if you can. But by hitting rock bottom, getting right back down to the bottom of those foundations and rebuilding again, but this time doing it the right way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no. So basically not, and I totally get it, because so basically when you came in and started your business, you came in with a book of business. So you didn't have to do that grind, that foundational work to establish the new clientele, because you kind of brought them with you. So it's almost like having a false sense of security, right?
But it's the same with I've worked with tradies before, and tradies have gone into partnership together. Did great. They brought their leads with them. The sort of energy between the different trades, so they could do more together. It was great. But then after about 10 months, and I've heard this a few times, because they didn't have those foundations which were to do with business skills and financials and all those kind of things, which are not the sexy parts of business, because they've not built that in at the beginning. So there's different things that you might not bring in at the beginning. With me, it was marketing. With these guys, it was systems and processes. But there's a whole host of foundation, and there's mindset as well. And I think what saved me was mindset. But you know, at the end of the day, there's all these sort of things that you should put into your foundation. But if you don't, and you come in at the higher floors, down you go.
Yeah, well, that's what I see too a lot in the coaching industry is when I work with people and they're saying they're looking for the latest thing. They're looking for the latest system. They're looking for the latest whatever tool that's going to get them over the finish line, or so they think it's over the finish line. And I'm sure you'd agree with me that the finish line doesn't really show up. I think when the finish line shows up, that means we're checking out and going somewhere else. You know, we're checking off this earthly plane. That's how I look at the finish line. But it's like they're always looking for the easier, you know, well, just something, that one thing. It's like they'll tell me, just tell me how to close the customer. It's not about that. They're buying you, they're not buying the line, right? And, you know, for sometimes it would be like the new funnel system. What's the new funnel system? What's the new autoresponder? There's another autoresponder system and email and texting that's going to come out this week too. It's going to be yet another tool. And of course, it's going to have all the bells and whistles, and it's going to be a game changer. And I find that they look for that stuff. So the whole thing for me with the acceleration factor and with the performance zone and moving everything forward is to get people back to the fundamentals, you know, from a personal level and from a business level, so that they understand, like you said, and I love what you just said, the whole aspect of it's not the sexy part, right? You know, doing that work, because that's where, I mean, when you don't do your paperwork, or you don't do your reports, or you don't look at the numbers, you don't really see where your business is. I had a guy tell me one time, if you can't tell me these numbers off the top of your head, you don't have a business. Right? And that's critical. Because you had, I mean, when the rock bottom story, that's a really, I mean, that would be something I would love for you to share with people, because I want them to see it's not always, they hear the stories, they look at the people, whether it's the current guru of how you're just one of these away from success. They don't see, and they touch on, I've been through their trainings to look, because I thought, hey, this is a great marketing system. And then you look and they touch on it, but they don't really get into the person who struggled. And it wasn't one, it was like 37 of them down the road, right? It was their 37th funnel that finally got them off the, 3 years into the game, that got them to where they needed to be. So if you don't mind, to share a little bit about that story, because I think it's important that people realize it's not all a bed of roses, and that there can be some struggles. And if you don't pay attention to the fundamentals, like you said, these are the things that can happen.
Okay, so look, as I said, my biggest weakness, and coming from a history where I worked for a market leader in its leash, and I was basically the power and the energy behind that marketing and promotion, and then completely forgot that, absolutely forgot any of it. I was just focused on the business. I was focused on the technical aspects. If you think of a business as a really ideal business as having somebody who's got that entrepreneurial thinking, the business management, the technicians, and the administration. So I wasn't actually looking at that higher level. I was here. I was, you said, could have been lazy because I already had a market. But the marketplace that you have needs to grow. It can't stay stagnant, because it doesn't stay stagnant. It just declines. Your lifetime value of your customer. I still have a client going back now 13 years, but that's the only one. I mean, I've had clients come in and go along the way, and increase. So what happened was great for the first 2 or 3 years, and then I knew something wasn't right. I mean, I felt the stagnation. And then I spent the next 2 or 3 years basically in the, to mention mindset, in a bit of a decline, because it was like the panic. And we're going to talk about focus in the next session, but focus is very important. And I didn't have that focus. I just went into panic mode for 2 or 3 years. I remember going to network meetings and feeling very, very depressed. It was me, and it's like you're channeling this. So everything that happened just led to a day in 2016 when we ended up losing the offices. losing staff, basically coming back home. You could say that this working from home, I'm sort of like a trailblazer because I did it a few years ago. But we work from home now.
Pre-COVID, right?
Yeah. But we managed it. And then I spent, because it was around about 2014, 2015, you know, in that era, that was the era when social media started to explode. So I spent quite a bit of time actually re-educating, well, not me, just my staff as well, re-educating, as you said, looking at the latest things we should have had in place, like a CRM, your customer relationship management, the social media platforms as they came along, the Facebooks of this world, etc. And all the rest of it. And actually, they're not a key feature, but we did actually, start looking at, what we should have known on the website. We introduced from about 2014. So, all this stuff should have been in place beforehand. Well, what was available at the time. And so we started sort of pedaling faster, too far down this, not too far down, because we managed to get there anyway. As I said, it was so bad. We were personally behind on mortgage, threatening letters from the bank, all the rest of it. You hear others do the same thing. But what saved me was there were some really good people out there, mentors, people who volunteered their time to support me through the crisis. And then coming back, it sort of like changes, you refocus again your mindset. As I said, we'll talk about this in later. But I realized after I did all those 3 years that I already knew what I needed to do. What was different was the tools of the day. And that's why I'm saying to people that your systems, the software you use are tools. It's the system you've got to think about. You've got to have a customer relationship management, a database.
Right.
Because it's part of a system. The tools that you use, that's what you research to find the one that's the most appropriate for you. Mm-hmm. But if you're not doing all that stuff in the beginning, then it's a very hard catch up, and it could be far down the line. So yeah, we sort of we also became more strategic. Planning is something as well that it's the beginning. And I've seen people who've put some business plans in place, but they've not really been business plans. You just mentioned earlier about not knowing the results, where you want to be, and at the end of the day, that's your vision. And until we got a clear vision,
right? Once
we got a clear vision, the whole mindset clicks, and your business starts to have meaning. So you're not pedaling along. You're not pedaling along, reacting or not reacting, as the case may be. You start to have focus. You've got the mindset. You've got the vision, and that helps you then to move forward. But I'm saying that was my journey. I mean, I really did go into the pit, and it was not a pleasant experience.
That's a great into the pit. That has so many different connotations, but in this case, I know exactly what you mean, because. And that's the thing that I get at when you're talking about strategic planning and that sort of thing. I mean, when people have that, one of the things they miss out, I think, if they happen to do a strategic plan, that's if they happen to do it. Because a lot of people say, I have an idea, let's just go, we go sell, and they talk to their friends, they network a little bit, then they get everything going, they bring some clients with them, like you said, but then when the real down and dirty hits and they don't have those things in place because it was never planned out properly. One of the other things I think that they miss, and this is where I come in with a lot of people, is who are they in relation to that? Are you the person with the skills? Are you the person with the ability to do this? And if not, that's fine. How do you get the skills and how do you get the ability? They don't do an evaluation of themselves. They're just thinking, well, I can just plug and play. And it's never, as you and I both know, we've all been, pitched and we have some of all the different programs that are out there. They're never just as easy as they say they are, right? It's always, just get this and just send a couple emails. You're going to make all this money. It's going to be easy, right? But when you learn to do the integrations and you learn to do, I guess part of it is you learn to do all that, but you learn to embrace the change as well. People, they think they can come in with the same skill sets that they had in corporate management, which there are some things that will help them, but then they want to be the business owner or the entrepreneur. And by the way, if you're paying attention to this and you're watching this, whether it's recorded or live, I said that particularly not just because Pat and I have had this discussion ad nauseum, that if you're a business owner, you're not necessarily an entrepreneur, and that's going to be one of the sessions we're going to do over the next couple of weeks. So make sure you tune in for the difference between an entrepreneur and a business owner, because there is a huge difference. But back to the point, you get these people that come from corporate America that are, and they're very talented at what they do, and they're very good at what they do. But then when they come on to work on their own, they struggle, and they sometimes fail. You know, and we're talking CEO type people that I happen to know personally that are considering jumping into the consulting world, you know. But I made the comment one time, I go, what are you going to do when there's $8 in your checking account? And he was like, what? I go, what are you going to do when there's only $8 or 80 cents in your checking account? Because especially that's the one thing an entrepreneur, or the business minded, right? The business owner has to get up and deal with. They have to understand it. That's a possibility. Now, I hope it's not. I hope nobody gets down to that point. But it's one of those things that people have to understand and address. And by having a solid foundation, by doing the strategic planning, by looking at all the different possible gaps in where they might be, and understanding that those things will change. This is what I've learned too, especially over the last 2 to 3 years. These things are changing so rapidly too. So the foundational plans that they set up in January of one year might not be effective in June, because of the rate at which things are changing. What do you think about that?
Well, that's interesting, because we set up our 5-year plan, and then we set up our annual plan, and then we do a 90-day plan, and we review that every 90 days. And you're right, and it's good because it's a journey. And
right.
you can't, I mean, come on, if you did it from January 2020, as you said, by June 2020, the whole world was changed.
Oh yeah, I mean, even in general, if you did it in 19, there would be a big difference. But I mean, you know, COVID threw a curveball to everybody. But it kind of goes back to that, and I've mentioned this before, the book Unlimited Wealth by Paul Pilzer. And he's an economist, he's a brilliant author. And he made the comment in that book that things will change, that people will have to embrace the change. For example, college, right? As you know, Gabi's over there in your former homeland of the UK. And she's studying exercise science. Exercise science is specific to what people, to a specific career path. So there are specific things she has to learn. But a lot of things that these kids are learning, they go to school 3 to 4 years in university. By the time they get out, technologically, a lot of those things are obsolete, because they're not, you know, technology changing so rapidly that a lot of people won't go to school for 4 years to be even an engineer, because all that stuff's going to change so rapidly. So as an entrepreneur, so if those of you that are watching this out there, to our audience, if you're a business owner, if you're going to be out there making your own way in the business world, get ready to embrace change, because it's going to move I mean, everything's on Zoom now, right? I mean, who saw that coming, right? How about and now if you're as in marketing tools, the new autoresponder systems, the new via text, also the texting systems that people are doing, how to reach people on social media, because nobody reads email anymore, right? What did they say? I was talking to somebody earlier today that said, who's the one of the Kardashian kids? I think it's the youngest one, gets paid like $1 million just to make a post on her social media, because she's an influencer. Now, what she influences, I have no idea, but you know, the fact that they carry that much, that's the way people are marketing to the masses now, is through these social media influencers. And it's really fascinating that, you know, as you have to factor all these things in. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, how is your foundation? You know, where do you have the vision? What's your vision? And one of the things I like to introduce to people is, who are you in relation to that vision? Do you have the tools? Do you have the mindset? Do you have the personal temerity and intestinal fortitude to gut it out when it gets rough? Because it's going to get rough, right?
Do you have the drive? Do you have the drive?
Right. The motivation, what was it? The motivation and ability. I just read a thing on 6 forces. It was really interesting. There's the personal. Do you have the motivation and the ability personally? That's number 1 and number 2. on your personal? What's your motivation level like and drive? How do you have it? Are you there? Does your goal excite you? Does the project excite you? Does it motivate you? Does it draw? Are you driven to see it to completion? Number two on that is, do you have the ability? What knowledge do you need? I was looking and I was going over my own stuff on this. Okay, from the coaching and the NLP skills, I've got all the knowledge I need. From some of the marketing, where if I don't have the skills, where can I get it? Well, this person, this person, this person, and this particular company. The second one is the third one is structural. The second one is oh my gosh, there was personal, social. Like what is in the social area? What's your ability? Right? What is your motivation in the social area? Do you have that? Is that key? And if not the ability, do you have the contacts in the network? And then the third one was in the structure. What's your structure like? Do you have systems set in place that will hold you accountable? And then the fifth one, or the sixth one, excuse me, that was 5. The sixth one is, do you have the, if not, where can you get that information? Or the analytics, right? So I've got the analytics, I've got the social, and I've got the personal, but I looked at, okay, this is where, and guys, if you're watching this, I'm telling you, this is gold that we're giving you here. That fifth one, step number 5, and this structural was where I was lacking, because I have to have some of those accountability factors built into the business to make sure for me to hit the goal. That was critical for me. And it was like, there it is now on paper. I can't ignore it. So those are the foundational things. Like, it's from the personal standpoint, you've got it. From a business standpoint, if people followed your strategy, what are the key points in your strategic planning, do you think, or what would be like 3 of the key points? I know there's more than that, but what are 3 key points that they would find in your strategic planning program?
On the program that we offer. Yeah, no, I mean, the key points are you do need to start with your vision, your mission, and your values. Values is something that I've learned that I actually have, because when I've made some decisions which on this one aspect of me goes, why did I make that decision? And then I realized I had some underlying values. Right. If you're, whatever venture you're in, that actually influences how you're perceived, and even through your whole systems, your people, etc. They all operate to a certain level of values. So just going back to me talking about that vision and mission stuff and what you're talking about, to me, once you've got that in place, then you're giving yourself, your organization, permission to get out of the way, as in your personal stuff, and then to become quite analytical. What do we need? But yeah, because you've actually got something set in stone as the ultimate goal, you can work backwards from that. So if you don't have that, then you're led by your emotions. And that's where people go unstuck. So yeah, vision, mission, values. Strategic planning is also, I don't do it in a vacuum. I work with organizations that tend not to really do their situation analysis, what the world is like out there, what's changing, what's coming. This is my definition of entrepreneurialism, is around looking for the opportunities and grabbing them, or changes and grabbing the opportunities. So that's where that all comes into. Everybody's aware of SWOT and stuff like that. Right. But look at more about your internal as well as external environments. So do a really good step in that. Then you talk to people internally and externally. So I've got a whole process that you can actually map that, so that people don't sort of try to take shortcuts in those terms. And then that leads to those, what is your goals? What are your strategic priorities for the next 3 to 5 years? I say, look, 3 years is a long time. 5 years is okay in a stable environment. But yeah, and also your goals are like milestones along the way to achieving your mission vision. So you don't have to get to there in 5 years. Your vision can be way out there, so you don't overstress yourselves. But you are, success breeds success. So every milestone you achieve, you're getting closer to that vision.
Right. The goals are the markers, right? They're just little markers along the way. Don't stress out about it. Yes. You're going to hit some. You're going to hit some early. You're going to hit some fast. You're going to hit some that take longer. You're not going to make some in the time you thought you were going to. but they're just steps along the way. And again, I think part of it is with the social media, with the smartphones and all these wonderful tools that we have that are, but I think it's brought us to like what I like to call the microwave mentality, right? Where everybody has to have everything now, right? They want to lose, I want to lose 30 pounds before my wedding. Well, when's your wedding? Next month. Well, yeah, you got 30 days. Sorry, that's unless you want to go for some liposuction or something of that nature. But then again, that's one of those things where, it's kind of like cheating. I was having this conversation with somebody at the gym. They go, well, is it really cheating? I go, well, yeah, you're not changing habits, right? Because there's those personal things that people have to change as well. So, but that's amazing. So in your strategic planning, you touch on the mindset, you touch on the actual business structure, you touch on the actual like steps to take of these are the things like what are the priority steps of tasks that people actually have to have, right?
Yeah. And actually have the template to work, have a workbook to work through and a template to put the plan together. So it is
right?
a process. Yes, and look, the bigger the organization, the more has to be some ownership at the top, and the top is usually boards as opposed to individuals. The strategic plan for somebody, like my business is very, very small in terms of input, people
Right.
contributing. So, you can, as I said, a strategic plan, it can be quite easy to do. I mean, if you're small, but the more complex the organization and the markets, etc., probably the more work that needs to be contributed to make it one that actually means something.
Right.
And then what we do is we just actually have a one pager, which is A3, which is an A3 summary, which will take it off the shelf or off the filing system and make it visible. Because when people see things and read them, it's like a vision board.
Yeah.
So having a written summary is like having a vision board. It's as simple as that.
And that's, I think that really helps people too, because when they come to those difficult times or those tedious tasks that they have to do, and that's where I find a lot of people, like I'll go through a goal setting program with somebody and they'll just, when it gets down to the tedium, the minute, the detailed work, they're just like, yeah, okay, I'll do this later. No, you have to do it now. Because if they put it off, then they put it off, then they put it off. And if you're missing that one small component, it's going to affect you down the road where you don't have that, you didn't do all the hard work to establish the foundation. So that's what makes the foundation weak. These people, they just don't get that. So, and guys, to put this in perspective, you have to understand who Pat is and where she comes from. Coming from the UK, I can let you talk about your UK background, but in Australia, she's the premier grant writing specialist. She deals with large organizations, helping people recover from the bushfires at any and all levels of grant writing, grant, proposals, etc. Whatever, I guess, what's the preparation, the administration, you hit it on all different levels, right? I mean, as far as what they're doing with their grants.
Yeah, no, I work with large and small. I work my main target group is a not-for-profit sector. I work in the community development, designing projects and running projects. So there's a lot of entrepreneurial stuff happening. I identify and work with people and organizations who have got that vision and really need that energy. Well, they've got the energy, they just need somebody to help them to achieve it. And some of my clients have actually gone on to win awards because of it. But it's been great and rewarding because you take that idea and you run with it, and you achieve the success you're looking for. And it's all strategic. I mean, otherwise you wouldn't get the results. Back in the UK, I worked in a university unit in a department that actually promoted how to get money out of Europe. We used to do a lot of work taking politicians, teachers, the general, not the professionals over to Europe, over to Brussels, and introduce them to the institutions. So we did quite a work, and one of the things I used to do was actually read the, I call them the pink sheets, the daily newsletters coming out of Brussels agencies about latest development in policies, looking for the opportunity. Once something becomes a formal document, a policy document, the funding follows. So that's when we would jump in there and organise conferences for the UK and international audiences.
Yeah, I mean,
so
I remember you told me it was that was in Edinburgh, wasn't it? The real big, that was like for the whole of Europe?
Yeah, we did the regional summit back in 1992. That was when UK had the presidency of the European Union. And usually there's there's the heads of state event, and then there's one that's for the mayors of Europe. And we were part of the organisation team for that particular one. Up in Edinburgh back in 1992, as you say. So yeah, that's one of many. But we didn't actually. We ended up in a market, and it wasn't actually what we set out to do. We were actually set up to provide support for small businesses in the run up to the single market in 1992. So the benefits they could get out of it. But we found that our market was not the small businesses. Our market was everybody but. It was the colleges, the universities, it was the public sector, it was the voluntary sector. So we built from that foundation. We built. So that's an interesting one, because I actually thought about, if you don't mind, what would go in those foundations apart from the mindset, and which is really strong, and it's basically what's put it all together.
Sure.
But I thought, okay, so what would you build on those 9 floors, so to speak, and you got the foundation at the bottom. But for me, I've already mentioned that you've got to build in marketing from the word go. You can't just rely on the market that you've got. You've really got to go out
there. Then you really don't have a business.
You don't have a business, or your business becomes a lot smaller, very, very quickly. You've got to have, as you've been pointing out, you've got to have your systems in place, and those systems, as you say, you may be looking for the latest technology. I say, okay, again, the technology is the tool. You've got to have the tool that works for you. So right. If you want a CRM, there's plenty of CRM retailers out there who can modify. But in the end, what I did, I used my Access database skills and created my own. But it worked for me. So, but what I didn't do at the time, I didn't have that database. I mean, I might have had a Filofax or something with the names of our clients, but it wasn't. It's about capturing leads and how you work with them, and etc. Because that's the next step is networks. Again, I had a network, and businesses have the networks when they come in. But if you've got to think about, we work across Australia, for example. So our networks had to change, and every year, this time of year, I look at the networks that I'm a member of, and I decide, do I want to be a member of this network, or do I need to change to another network? So it's return on investment, etc. And you have to actually, people go to networks and they think, or meetings, and they go, oh, we haven't got anything out of this within the first 5 minutes. You know what I mean? You've got to persevere in networks, because networking was what actually gave me that rebound after the crisis. So wouldn't it have been really good if, yes, well, with me
to give you a lead.
Yes, and in this case, believe it or not, it was a Jewish newsletter. It was a Jewish newsletter in Melbourne that was put out there, and I ended up with a very, very good Jewish client base. That's all it took. I mean, it was, you just don't know, but you've got to build that know, like, and trust. So build it through, not just going online and, trying to build it that way, but it's people, and people know people.
Yep.
So that's been, been something you can call on. The next one is people. And you've talked about that. What you can do yourself in your skills, you don't have to do it all yourself. Think about how much it's costing you, and how you can, one of the things I had to do was to employ an assistant, and because they can take that the cheaper work off this cheap, the cheaper pricing, what it costs. So that frees you up to do more of the where the high value is. Or you can be outsourcing, like for instance, bookkeeping. No
Right.
business owner wants to be bookkeeping, but somewhere along the line, you do need to have that access to good financial skills. Because if you don't, for instance, the example of these two partner tradies, after 10 months, finance was a big issue for them because they just didn't know how they were traveling. And you have to have somebody reliable, because that's the other thing that they do. You bring along people and I've heard so many instances, especially when it comes to finances, when that person has not been as legitimate as they could be.
Right.
And so you do need to actually have that know, like, and trust happening. You do need to do your research. You do need to make sure that the people that you're working with or working for you are actually supporting you. So again, as I said, the foundations that I've seen fall apart is when you bring people along with you, but they're not necessarily the right people for the job.
Because sometimes when they do, and that's the thing, when people go out on their own, they start a business, they're building something, and they bring in people who are friends and family, which is fine if you want to do that, but are they the right friends and family? Like my brother-in-law, if I wanted somebody to do a certain like leadership, structural, managerial role, he's ideal because number one, he's German, right? He's born to German parents, so he's got that mentality of everything has its place, and he's very efficient, and he's very thorough, and he's great at stuff like that. Other areas, I wouldn't want him in that position, right? But that's the thing, though. And with today, as you're mentioning all that, it's beautiful. It's kind of a thing. It's a scary thing, but there's also so much support through technology, through apps, through different programs, through virtual assistants, right? The VA is a real big thing right now that you can get very cost effective, that that you can apply in your business when you need to start spreading out. There's all kinds of different tools out there now, but you have to do your research, make sure it's a good one, but also know when it's time to make that move and say, where am I? Where is it? What's the best use of my time, right?
Yes.
So and that's part of understanding and staying true to that, because people think that once they build up, they have to have this big super role. No, your job is still your job, driving revenue. For example, in my business, driving revenue. As I bring on somebody to help over here, that's not their job, that's my job. Their job is to keep me doing my job.
Yeah. And the way that you can justify it to yourself is consider the return on investment. As you said, especially if you're a bit tight with your money, or you're coming from that fear factor. But yeah, no, look at the return on investment, and it doesn't have to be direct. It could be, as you said, if you've got an admin assistant, look, they can, and for us, they help with projects, right? So that's great, because like some of the project costing can go down to that level. But what they're doing is, because we've got those assistants in place, as said, the value to you is part of the ROI as well. So I always start thinking on that. Even things that you invest in, like for instance, the foundations they're talking about you, is that education, continual education. Now that I don't know about how have you observed this. I come from an education and training background. I was the Regional Education Development Officer for adult education in North East Victoria, great big region, for a few years. So I was very sort of familiar with the registered training, the formal qualifications, the non-formal qualifications. But one of the sort of like the areas of mystery was actually training businesses. How do you get to businesses? Now, you can get to them for first aid and all those compliance type things, but it's like even in the UK, as I said, we found out businesses weren't our niche. So it was always interesting. But I found since starting a business of my own, that there is a lot of education, training, professional development available to businesses by businesses. It's like a whole ecosphere that the formal training system is not familiar with. It's amazing how much education, and some of it's free because it's like those leaders into the bigger programs.
Sure.
But you know, I'm saying that if you're starting your journey, then just access what you can. Obviously don't go, there is a limit to it. I did it for 3 years.
Well,
I did engaging form as well, but I mean intensive, immerse yourself, and then through the rest of your life. Do you know what was the most beneficial route for me when it came to getting access to learning?
no, which one?
Mr. Kindle.
You know that I can see that. I can see that, because the thing I want to point out too is that if you go back to kind of bring it back home as we start to get close, we're getting close to time to wrap up here, is that if we go back to the foundation of having a vision, of understanding where it is, what's your mission, right? What is your, where's your focus going to be? But have that vision, the goals, the objectives, know where you're going, lay that foundation down so that you understand what this whole thing's about. You know where to look for education, you know where to look for help, because there's no way in the world, as somebody who used to have the Encyclopedia Britannica when I was a kid, and I had to look it up in the encyclopedia, there's no way that people can say they just don't have the information today, because it's everywhere. There's information everywhere, and some of it's good, a lot of it's good, and a lot of it's garbage. So you have to find out what's going to work for you guys, and part of that goes around having a plan. Pat, real quick before we wrap up and go, because I mean there's so much, and we're going to be here again next week, same time, guys. There will be a different link, because I did not make this a permanent link, but we'll have a different link up that'll carry us through the next few weeks. But real quick, if somebody wanted to reach out and contact you, how would they do that?
Find me on LinkedIn. Look for Patricia Grosse on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way to get to me.
Okay, and that's spelled Grosse on the last name. So
yes,
Patricia Grosse. It is. So just want to make that, look her up, check her out. We're going to be back. Pat and I are going to be back next week. We're going to be talking about focus, because there's so many distractions in the world right now. But now at the same time, this is the best time to be building. It's the best time to be chasing your dreams, because there's so much out there and there's so many people willing to engage. Yes, I know there's a world of stuff going on with the pandemic, but you know what? This call is going to be COVID free, because we're not going to talk about it. We're going to focus on you and how you can utilize some of the stuff we're talking about to start to make your dreams happen. Not make your dreams come true and chase and make the billion. Hey, one step at a time, guys. Use these fundamentals to get the dream started. Pat, do you have anything you want to say in closing?
Yes, sure. We'll put a link in there, but if anybody's interested, I've got coming from a book that I wrote called The Intuitive Marketer. I've got a hands-on strategy for a startup business. So if anybody wants to look at, the gain from my experience, there's about 10 to 12, it's a checklist of 10 to 12 things you need to have in place to ensure that you've got a good foundation in your marketing.
And there you have it. So we'll be back here next week at the same time, which I think is 10 a.m. in Australia, and it's been 6 p.m. here on the East Coast, 5 Central, 4 Mountain, 3 Pacific, for those of you that are counting. Remember to put everything you have into everything you do, because the best is yet to come. We'll see you next week.